Good morning and welcome to the live talk program here with Lloyd Grubby, your host. We're doing current events on this year Thursday morning Rise and Shine, and this morning here we're looking at a topic: give up ideals to save person, church, institution, or country. So this is what we're looking at here this morning as we do our current events, talking about things that are current in our life. And so, welcome again. Hopefully, you had a blessed night rest, and thanks for joining me here this morning. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you again for the blessings of your word. I thank you, dear Lord, for the blessings, dear Lord, of knowing thee. And I pray, Father, that as we look at these things, we'll see the importance of the truths that you have given to us as a people. Bless us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. So, sharing with you this morning here, this topic, or this idea here that a person can give up ideals to save themselves or to save a church, an institution, or a country. And when this happens, what in fact is happening is that the person who gives up the ideology or the ideal is a standard that we shoot for, we attempt to gain, not necessarily something that we even have. But when a person decide to give up an ideology or the ideology that they hold dear, it makes them or the thing that they're trying to save, it stop being itself and it change into something else. So this is the premise that I'm going to explore this morning here. So the idea there is, in a broader statement, is that if you're judged as a person that's honest and you have to now do something that is dishonest to save yourself, that means, say, you run into financial problems or you run into a situation that's going to affect you socially. And what you have to do is lose your integrity to try to preserve yourself. Say you're accused of something, or you literally did something wrong that's out of character. And now to cover that wrong, you're going to do something that is you're not known by, to cover yourself because you're trying to save yourself. In essence, what you're doing is you're morphing into something that you are not in order to preserve yourself. But what you're doing is not preserving yourself, which is my premise here, is that you're becoming somebody different. This is why normally, as they say, a good person, a person that is known, quote unquote, to be a good person, can do certain things and certain crimes that make them look not just like they did wrong, but that they're monsters. And you say, how did a person get to become a monster? Because often they morphed into something else by perverting the principles they hold dear. They hold this principle dear and then they pervert it. And this is why I believe that giving up ideals, something that you might not 100% be living by per se, but it's an ideology that you look to as something that is an ideal and you're trying to attain to. When you move away from that, that changes everything. And so I'm going to delve into this for the next how many minutes here with you. And just to put that thought in your mind, that as you go through your day, you think about that. Who are you as a person? And what do you stand for? And could situation push you in a corner, so to speak, to give up those ideals? Because they're ideals. They're things that we hold dear, but often crucibles in life, cross-bearing situation could cause us to drop the cross and go against the ideal to our own shame. And that's the problem with life. We always have choice. Choice is always there. Choice is what make it more to me, in my mind, as an ideal. I don't know about you, what you think about this or thought about this, but the choice, because you can give up anything that you hold dear real quickly under pressure. Now, before I get into some specifics, I want to read for you, and this will kind of set us in a right way. This is in Jeremiah chapter 2, and I'm going to read quite a few verses from Jeremiah 2 for your meditation here this morning. Jeremiah 2, verse 1, firstly through 3. And it says here, "Moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Go and cry in the ears of Jerusalem, saying, Thus says the Lord, I remember thee, the kindness of thy youth, the love of thine espousal, when thou wentest after me in the wilderness, in a land that was not sown. Israel was holiness unto the Lord, and the first fruit of his increase. All that devour him shall offend. Evil shall come upon them, says the Lord. So here we have this first description of what Israel is. Notice here Christ described Israel as coming after him, right? Is an espousal, just like any relationship, marital relationship. One person make a move and the other person make another move. That move, the secondary move, is like the person is approving the action. So this is not person didn't want what was being offered. The person say, I'll go after it. And so this is what the Lord described Israel going into the wilderness, into a barren land. They were attracted to the glory and attracted to the promises, and they go after it in an ideal way, very idealistic, I would say, immature. This is what love is. I always say most people will never experience marriage or love if they didn't find love in their young age, because young love get people married all the time. Excited, they're bursting with hormones, and they're just excited of getting into a relationship. And as people get older, they start becoming suspicious and jaded, and they're like, oh dear, here we go. But when you're young, man, the excitement, and this is what Israel was: young, in love, going after the Lord in the wilderness, exciting, and then trouble start because the wilderness experience kick in, the bills start to come, things start to happen. And so I just point this out here first before I go to verse 11, that things were beautiful, things were great, but things kind of fell apart real quickly. And that's what it is. Most people probably about a year, 2 years, and then they realize what a great mistake they make. So this is why the Bible often uses the marriage situation. So when we talk about ideals are things that are there that we idealistically look to. But when trouble comes, we can quickly back out of the ideal, because we realize the rubber now meets the road. The reality of executing that ideal or maintaining that ideal can be very, very severe, because it can be challenged and tested real hard. And people can say, well, due to this situation, we need to throw that away. So when we see a nation or we see an institution or church saying, due to this situation or that situation, we have to put that ideal aside or that belief system aside, personally, you can understand why. Because the pressure makes them do that, because it's easier to go life a certain way. I'll explain more as we move forward. Now in verse 11 through 14, now in the same Jeremiah chapter 2, it said, "Hath a nation changed their gods, which are which are yet no gods, but my people have changed their glory for that which doth not profit." So it's a very important question, because if Israel at this time, in the time of Jeremiah, was identified as a nation that served a specific God, the God in the Bible is intellectually very well described. Often people talk things about God, but they not even understand fully the God, or a clear understanding of the God of the Old Testament. So Israel had a specific, special God. Their God was not wood and stone. Their God was a very specific, different God from all the gods that other nations serve. The other nations serve gods that were carved images, or they were some type of mythological image that didn't have any kind of great intellectual philosophy behind. The Jewish God was a very specific God. It was a God that you could not see, but he created the heavens and the earth and so forth. So Jeremiah asks this question because if you change your God, which is the premise of what I'm talking about here this morning, you would change who you are. And if you change who you are, then you no longer what you claim to be, because you're giving up those principles, those ideas, those belief systems, and you would be a different nation. How you think about that? And so it is with yourself. The principles that you live by is what really make you who you are. More on that in a second again. So verse 11, "Hath a nation changed their gods, which are yet no God," or gods, But my people have changed their glory for that which doth not profit. So there's a specific idea there. There's something about the God of the Old Testament and most actually New Testament, the Bible, that if you follow that God, the Bible claims that you will profit. This is something that's consistent throughout the Bible. It's profitable to serve the God of the Bible. It's unprofitable to serve the gods of, say, the Syrian or the Babylonian. It diminishes. It doesn't build up. There's no increase. There's a decrease. That's important. So I say to you, I believe in the God of the Old Testament. You could look at me and say, so you're a person that's very profitable. You always have increase. And I'll be like, yeah, how you know? It's an infused idea there. Infused. So when you give up something, you change. And so often people will give up for various different reasons. But here, he says they changed their God. And they changed from the real living God to a God that did not profit them. So then you would say, well, so then Israel started to waste away. And that's the story of Jeremiah. That's the story of Isaiah that you get. When you read the minor prophets, that's what you get in. A nation in rebellion against the God that they serve is a nation that is oppressed. Notice here, verse 12. Be astonished, O ye heavens, at this, and be horribly afraid. Be ye very desolate, says the Lord. Be ye very desolate. Notice here, God ties this idea that you turn it back against me, desolation comes. It is just the reality. So, again, you see, because somebody say, well, how is this current event? We constantly see last year, this year, the year before, the death rate, the how long a person live, all those numbers are going in the opposite direction. More people are dying every year, and people are living shorter across the board in the United States. But while it is happening, more and more people are like, we don't believe in God, we reject Christianity, we reject God, and we're now gone secular. But what is left is desolation. What is left is desolation because the person feels suicidal or they feel their life is not worth it and they need drugs to keep them fruitful. See, so they have turned their backs. So the result is always following. So when you understand this, you can understand what current events is. Current events to me is always just a calculation or a reporting, on what's happening based upon people's moral standing, their principles they live by. And when you turn your back against God, basically, you experience what the Gentiles, the world over, experience, which is this desolate, empty feeling of what's the point, feeling of there's no reason to life because I don't even know why I'm here, and all that. And that's basically the background information to what we read in the news. And notice here, he said you have to be astonished and be very fearful for this. It's a horribly afraid. And we've seen this is horrible fearful because the more people turn away from God is the worse things get. Notice here verse 13. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken, firstly here, they have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters. So that's number one, sin against Israel back in the time of Jeremiah. And it's always a sin of the people. We see this in the dark ages also. They have forsaken the fountain of living waters. And hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. Is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? Why is he spoiled? Why is this person spoiled? You see this person, they walk out of the church and they walk away from God and you think, oh, so what are they leaving for? Oh, they're leaving for better? No, they're leaving for worse. They're leaving so they could become a servant of sin, a homeborn slave, and as a person that's spoiled, being spoiled by all kind of opiates, all kind of various different drugs and alcohol, being spoiled by every type of gambling and every type of vice. and no profitability in this life. And the first sin, which is their forsaking the fountains of living waters. Christ says in John 4 that out of thee shall flow forth living water. You will drink living water, and out of you shall come living water. You'll have life. You'll be like an oasis in the middle of a desert. And this is what we see when you're faithful to God. Around is desolation. People just depressed. They say for every one person that commits suicide, another 288 people within the population is thinking about doing it. That number is astronomical when you think about, I think it is 45 or 70,000. All of a sudden the numbers get jumbled in my mind. So when you take a number like 45,000 and you multiply it by 288, you get a very large figure, something like that. I should have punched it in my calculator before I say it, because I read this article last week and I was like, I didn't want to go through reading all of that. Just want to put the background to the current events news for you so you can see how it works. Because again, they have forsaken the fountain. Two sins. You forsake the fountain of living waters, but you say, well, I'm still in need of some water. I still in need of something, because no way to get rid of this guilt. No way to get rid of this depressing loneliness, empty feeling. As a matter of fact, they normally call these type of suicides despair deaths. Despair deaths. The person is dying from despair. Person have all the things that this world have, but they're dying from despair. So you see a person in despair and depression, and they say, I'm going to medicate that depression and despair with some marijuana, with some heroin, with some alcohol, with probably some other type of sexual immorality, gambling, everything to just take away this, oh man, this feeling I have, like, what's the point? And that's the reality. So notice here, it is giving up an ideal or giving up a belief. And often a person will give up something to save themselves. And what they're doing is, by giving it up, they're really causing themselves the problem. Church does it, institution do it, and people, the country do it. A group of people on their own. They give up something, but in essence, they're changing. They're just choosing one thing for another thing. It's not, people don't just give up stuff. You normally switch stuff out. Person believe this way, and they switch that out and believe something else. But often that changes who they are, and that changes their experience. Like I was talking about here, profit or no profit, broken cistern or the fountain of living waters. Notice in that text there, because I want to make sure you see that there, they just didn't give up the fountains of living water and then just walk away and say, la la la, I'm free. They went and create their own broken cisterns that hold no water. So they gave up one for the other. So you don't just give up an ideal. You normally swap out, as they say, or switch out. You say, I'm going to give up this, I'm going to create this. This is the foundation also of all false religion, all false teachings. Because people normally switch something for something else. They normally start believing in some new ideology. Because people say, oh, I don't believe in God. Yeah, but I don't believe in God, they said, but they believe in something. They gravitate to something else, and they use it in place of to explain. That's why people want evolution, and they want some other form of belief system. I heard somebody say when they die, they're going to become part of the universe. And people come up with other things, but they switch out because you still can explain we're on a big chunk of a sphere in the middle of the universe spinning and getting suntan every day. That's strange. Notice here verse 19 through 21 here. So Israel, they've gotten broken cisterns. They have a new God. So in a sense, they change because they're no longer following the God of the Bible. They're no longer following a profitable God. They now following a broken cistern system that's going to make them a servant. They're just going to make them a homeborn slave. Homeboy is going to be a slave now. And they're going to be spoiled. And the history proved that. When you think about the Christian church, who became the Catholic Church, that led Israel, that led Europe into a dark ages. You apply the same principle. Israel is a servant, a homeborn slave, and is spoiled. You apply that same philosophy there, and literally this will happen. The Muslims or the Islam will constantly attack them. There'll be constant plague. Ignorance will be massive. The spread between the rich and the poor was massive. The pedophilia and the homosexuality and all these things became massive. All these things follow in their trail. Like the curses just keep coming. The plagues keep coming. Because, again, they changed. They were not profitable more. They went from a profitable religion to a religion that was not profitable, that was desolate. And the darkness, and as I said, the pale of darkness just hang over Europe for 1,260 years. Israel, just like Israel, they became servant, homeborn slave, and they were spoiled. Constant wars, constant attack, because there would be no peace. When you understand that, you get the current events of news, why the news and all this going on in politics and in the church is so tumultuous, because when you change and you give up an ideal, oftentimes now the next step is you're going to do everything to save the institution, to save the person, but nothing will work because the thing that was the safety for the institution was the ideal. And I wish I could just copy that little part there, because that's the point. You know, sometimes it's hard to explain these things in a topic. I need some little space there. So you're giving up the ideal, but the ideal is what was the thing that was saving the institution and making it prosperous. But the moment you give it up to save the institution, because the person think, well, we're in crisis, we need to give it up. I'll give you some examples in a few minutes. Then what will happen is that they will end up destroying the institution, because they forget what made the institution great was the same ideals that they're giving up. But they give it up to save the institution. It's a very weird belief system. You'll see in a second. Now notice here that thine own wickedness shall correct thee. You see that there? You can be corrected by your own wickedness. It don't mean that you might take the correction, but you'll be straightened up because you get stuck. Thine own wickedness in verse 19 shall correct thee, and thy backsliding shall reprove thee, because you're going to go down a certain path and the beatings are going to be real. Know therefore and see that it is an evil thing and bitter that thou hast forsaken the Lord thy God, and that my fear is not in thee, says the Lord of hosts. So notice here, your own wickedness, because, you know, here's the thing, like we believe vengeance is belong to God and God does repay. But even a secular person, if they have a pulse and they're using their brain a little bit, they will always say karma is a bleep bleep bleep, because they know ultimately that and you see it over and over again, that what goes around comes around. You sow to the flesh, you reap corruption. They might not accept the Bible because they have a different ideology that's making them desolate, but at least they have enough sense to recognize that life is weird or there's God. You can view it either way, but either way, what goes around comes around. You see people get what they sow, reap what they sow. So thy own wickedness shall correct thee, and thy backsliding shall reprove thee. Verse 20, for of old times I have broken thy yoke and burst thy bands. And thou sayest, I will not transgress, when upon every high hill and under every green tree thou wanderest, playing the harlot. Yet I have planted thee a noble vine, holy, a right seed. How then art thou turned into the degenerate plant of a strange vine unto me? So they turn degenerate, and you can see a parade of the degenerates on TV every day, going and parading on the various different talk programs, talk shows on TV. Why? Because this is becoming a norm. And you can go to some churches and also they have these same crazy programs as part of the church. The church is the program. Every weird and wicked thing going on, and it almost seems like it's normal. So notice here it says, of old I've broken your yoke. You are free. You are free. And it says, and thou saidest, I will not transgress. So it's okay, then you're good. I'll marry you. You were in love with me. I said, man, you're free. I don't have to watch you. I don't have to put monitoring devices on you to make sure to help you keep faithful. I believe you'll be faithful. But it says, under every green tree thou wanderest and play the harlot. Wherever is a green tree, the person look at it and say, oh, time to play the harlot. And then the freedom then going to get taken away, because the freedom was given because you were in love and because you behave that way. So say you're free. I trust you. You love so much, you're going to be faithful. But as that love died down, the person started playing the harlot. All right, so that's the main premise there. So look at this thing now. So I mentioned it before. Normally when you talk about an investment firm, you talk about an investment firm that has fidelity. So somebody said, that's a good word. Let's name an investment firm Fidelity. Why? Because the customers need to know that we're going to be faithful. But if that investment firm still has the name Fidelity, but they're not, I don't know anything about Fidelity Investments. I'm just saying that. Just using them as an example, good name. And they're not faithful anymore. They would still maintain the name, but they would have given up the principle that make them be known in the community or in the society as a good place to put money to invest. But many times what companies will do is that they'll give up the core principle because they're in a financial situation and they have to think, oh, in order for us to survive, we have to start stealing. So we have to start being infidelity in order to save the company. But by doing that, you are no longer what you were, what made people trust you. So you can imagine a company that's called Fidelity is now Infidelity. And I just say this again. I know nothing about that company. I don't know what they're doing. I just use it as a good example. So Fidelity. So you can imagine that. And you have so many different companies like that have it. But you see, in the past, especially like even in 2007, 2008, many of those companies for years were practicing infidelity while having similar names like that to convey the idea of that they're trustworthy. But they were doing this to save themselves because their financial choices were truly not infidelity and faithfulness to their customers. The corporate culture had changed and leadership probably have changed and they have walked away from their principle. But to put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, they just go full overboard and just start being crooked. So this is the concept there, that when you truly walk away from your core principle, you're no longer what you claim or what people believe that you are. But people do this all the time to save themselves or save a church. Notice here, you have this idea of a free market, right? Free enterprise, free market. No pope to stop you like in Europe. Imagine the founding fathers came over from Europe. They have no pope to try to stop them and no centralized church. It creates free market. They have no state to be in their backs, quarter in their houses, taking money from them unnecessarily. Because imagine if you're already paying taxes and say your effective tax rate is 15%, but you have a soldier that's living in your house. What's the effective tax rate? You don't know. It depends how much he eat and how much room he want to take up. So now the government now is basically taxing you probably double. Probably your effective tax rate now is 15%. It's now 30%. You're being stolen from. You're being treated unfairly. So you have this thing now where these principles infuse, and now you have, say, a free market. But then we now see in every so often we see these things we call bailouts. They never bail out the poor people, they bail out the rich people. And so they're constantly bailing out of these corporations because they're choosing winners and losers. And the big guy get bailout, but the poor guy doesn't get bailout. If you say, hey, I want to start a small business, and it's just going to be two people working in a small business, there's really no incentives and no, oh yeah, okay, you want to start a small business, you get 10 years of tax break. They don't do that. But now if you're a big corporation, you say, oh, no, I'm going to create 100 jobs, 1,000 jobs. They say, oh, for the next 10 years, you have to pay no taxes. And then you're competing now with somebody that has to pay no taxes. And say again, if the effective corporate tax rate is, say, 30%, and you're doing business and you can't get those breaks, those guarantees that if you make profit, you don't have to pay those taxes for the next how many years. Yeah, there's a free market in principle, but it's not, because, oh, what, we have to save these jobs and we have to do these things. Well, let the free market run. Let it be open competition. But they'll change that. But when they change that, the principle or what the foundation is for whatever the institution, the country, whatever, is no longer, it's a different system. But yet that's the system that's supposed to make the country great. Notice there, same thing with honesty. If you're a person that's honest and you get into a situation and you say, man, to save myself, I'm going to be dishonest, then you can see how quickly that could turn where you're not an honest person anymore. But you became dishonest, so to speak, to save yourself. People normally make these type of bad move when they're in a situation and they feel like they have to compromise their principles, they have to compromise their integrity to save themselves. Just keep that in mind. And you and I have to deal with these things all the time. Because the thing that makes us who we are, we often have to compromise. You see this even with famous people a lot of times. They have certain belief systems that they hold dear, but the moment they're in a crunch, they often will betray those systems to keep the fame. They'll say, well, you know, I said that 5 years ago, but I'm in a different place right now. And they'll deny or betray what they really core believe because they become too famous. This is why when people are in a small position in life, they normally can live a certain way and talk a certain way, but as they become bigger, they have to sell out that because they're worried that they might lose whatever position they gain. Stick with me here. So again, cruel and unusual punishment. Now, this is something that we have, that we hold, we believe we hold dear, like in the United States, no cruel and unusual punishment. So, but you notice here, although this is an ideal, this was never something that was lived out by America. This is just an ideal. That's why I say ideals are all, that's all it is, ideal. But often, somebody say, well, it depends on the crime. Because you could say, well, you could do cruel and unusual punishment to protect the country. Normally we say cruel and unusual punishment is okay for national security purposes. Are you familiar with this? So this is normally talk. Almost every war that America enters into, they will use this idea that for national security, you have to inflict cruel and unusual punishment. One of the more famous modern example of that would be Guantanamo Bay with the waterboarding. The idea was, well, you know, we got to protect ourselves. So the concept of the Constitution has to be suspended so that we can protect ourselves. But then the whole idea is what made ourselves, quote unquote, ourselves. Isn't it this idea? Isn't it ideal? But the person said, no, we have to protect ourselves. Self-preservation is important. So we have to give up this ideal. But by giving up the ideal, what you're doing is you're changing yourself. And you now are morphing into the thing that you're fearful of. So it's so quick and easy for a person who is giving up an ideal, like this ideal, no cruel or unusual punishment. They can quickly morph and they can become the person that they're afraid of. In other words, the person that is afraid of terrorists and is willing to use cruel and unusual punishment in dealing with terrorists, in themselves become a terrorist, if that makes sense. So the person who say, I need to use cruel and unusual punishment to deal with people who are kidnapping people and torturing them, turn around and say, what we're going to do, we're going to set up a site outside the United States to kidnap people and torture them in order to protect us from people who are kidnapping people and torturing them. The persecuted become the persecutor, because the persecuted is trying to protect themselves and start to use principles that the persecutor is using, and they become themselves a persecutor. The person flip, because they give up ideals to save themselves, and in so doing, they become the monster that they fear. If you notice, we have to protect. You can go through the history and just do a quick history of many of the wars, as I say, foreign wars, and you see the punishment inflicted upon the people that are being fought against. You would say, who did this? And if you were not, if you say, for instance, I was given a report and you got a redacted report, and the names of the countries were removed, and the groups, whether it be guerrilla groups or freedom fighters or just rebels, all those names were redacted, and you read about the inflicting of punishment, they will say, man, there's some cruel or unusual punishment. And you say, who did this? And if you didn't know, you would think oftentimes the country that has the rule, no cruel and unusual punishment, they were the one that were being punished. And then you realize, no, they were doling out the punishment. They were actually acting as if they were terrorists. And you see this, as I've talked to many people who fought in Vietnam War, and they say, yeah, one person was telling me, yeah, I was good for it because I didn't have no problem. He was saying to me, just go into a village and wipe the women and children out. So I said, why? He said, well, what it is that when you go to a village and it's like, say, 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's no men in the village, you just automatically know the men are out fighting against Americans. So what you'll do is just kill everybody in the village. And they say you'll kill everybody in the village. So in the morning when they come back from fighting, that would be their punishment. When they see their women and their kids die. So you would say so you are sworn to the Constitution to not inflict any such punishment on people. Yeah, but war is hell. So you inflict it, but by doing so, you're giving up the ideals to save yourself or your country or a church or an institution. And by doing that, you become what you hate. And many people have learned this in life. That it's so easy for you to become what you hate. You hate the thing and you become the thing. Because you think, well, what was I going to do? I didn't have any choice anyhow. We always have choice. The problem is with choices, they become difficult to make when we're in a tough situation. And it's easy to do the easy route. Notice this idea here that is being rejected right now by so much of us is that you bring me your sick, your poor, your huddled masses. Many people say, well, that's not in the Constitution, so we don't have to live by that. But things can go real fast, real quickly. We could say, because I am scared and I'm in a tough situation or I'm broke, I need to not accept the sick, the poor, the huddled masses. And I need to reject them because I'm sick and broke and poor. Not understand the blessings of God and all that. So notice here, you can reject the principle, but you can go to the point where self-preservation not only make you reject the principle, but you can not really be not buying, but you say, well, we need uranium for nuclear power plants, for bombs to protect ourselves. We now go to foreign countries that have these oil, these, natural resources. We could go create poor, create sick, create refugees, create masses of people that now are coming back to us and say, hey, help me. And you said, no, not only did I create you, but I ain't gonna help you. And this is what we see going. This is the news. You go to the news and you hear about people on the southern border, and you realize that the main country from a foreign country application, because every country has to sit on their own bottom, so to speak. They have their leaders, but you find out that America is involved in Honduras and is help creating these refugees, involved in so many other countries in the world like Libya and Syria and so forth, with various different wars in Afghanistan, creating all these refugees, and then says, don't bring me them here. So that's the news. That's just the background of the news. You can reject the principle that made you who you are, and you give up those ideas, and then you say, I'm doing it to save me. But by doing this, you're morphing into something else. You're morphing into something that is not good. I remember when I just came, I always remember this to this day. One day I went to, they used to be in Seventh Adventist Church, these, I guess it's called like a franchise. I don't know if it was a franchise, but it used to call ABC, Adventist Book and Bible House. I remember going there, and I was just looking for some books, and some they would point me to these books written by this author, Ellen G. White. Now, I was familiar with her. I was reading her before, but Ellen G. White writes some of the literature in her church. And just imagine, I'm trying to explain to you because I know exactly who's listening, but you go to the Book and Bible House and they sell you these people book. You get baptized, rebaptized, they'll give you this person book. Her name is E.G. White. So imagine now you start to read the books. So remember, they're selling and making profit off the books. But you start reading the books and believing the books, and then start to regurgitate or repeat the things in the book. And then people start attacking you and say, why are you saying these things? And you're like, because you gave me the book. You sold me the book. And so are you telling me that I have to swear that I believe in a writing as true? And then you turn around and attack me for it. So if you do that, aren't you giving up what you believe in? Aren't you becoming something different? And why would you make profit off something you don't believe in? And if you give it to me, but you don't think that I'll probably read it and start believing it because you told me to believe it? You see how quickly a system can change and become something totally different. Saying that I'm pro something but really against it, and acting as if I'm for it but really I'm against it. And they're not it anymore. There's something else, because automatically by saying I reject this, you're no longer what you said you were. You're something else. While claiming to be what it is. It's like a pit. A pit is, sooner or later somebody's going to fall in that pit if you don't cover it. That's where you put a manhole cover, because a man can go into it whole. I don't think that's where it come from. But a whole man can fall into that hole. And if you don't put a cover on it, they're going to fall into it. And somebody fall into it, whoever didn't cover it but dig it is responsible. And to me, that's how I see the church. It's like a trap. You say you believe this, but then you do something else. So much more could have been said on that. Think about this idea here, right? That the KKK is a Christian organization. I want you to think about that. And I remember one day I was watching something, and I was just sitting there, and the person was talking about, and like it never clicked in my mind all this time. But the person was talking about they follow Christ, and they said they're against Jews, and I think some of them are against even the Pope or the Catholic. And I'm just sitting there, and all of a sudden, it dawned on me for the first time. I don't know why. It was many years before that I've heard about this. I didn't really know. I guess never really heard one of the Cyclops. I think they call the name of the head guy. Weird. Talk. So I think it was the first time I ever heard an interview, and they're talking, and all of a sudden it clicked in my mind. They're a Christian organization. That's fascinating. That's all I was just looking. And I just, all of a sudden, whatever he was saying, I zoned out. Because I was just like, it's almost like I discovered gold. And I was like, they believe in Jesus? And they think the Jews are bad? And the Jews are dangerous to society? How quickly one can morph and reject everything that they believe in while claiming they believe it. Reject everything. And saying at the same time that the Jews are monsters. Just imagine, this barbecue pit where you have the animal is like pork, like prodded through, and it's being spin on a horizontal plane. You know what I'm talking about? This is like a rotisserie, but it's spinning. The thing is spinning horizontally. And imagine somebody from the KKK have a black person on that thing. And you can read this up. This is literally true. And they would say they call it a barbecue. And they would just spin that, tie the person up to that horizontal skewer. And they would spin them until the heat of the fire kill them. And they would come out and watch it. That would be like, I guess, a Sunday evening matinee. And then that person like, I believe in Jesus. And the Jews, they're bad. They're so bad. What they do to the Jesus and how they love money and all that. They're bad people. But they will skewer a black person and find that as entertainment. So when you see that, you see how quickly you can give up an ideal. Quickly give up an ideal. And saying, oh, I'm doing this because I'm protecting my white women from being raped. And you say, oh, so it's self-preservation. Yeah, I'm just preserving myself. I have to protect the Aryan race. But in that preservation, quickly, you see how the person goes from good to bad. You see this all the time. Let me balance this out. A person who could be in a black community, and they probably listen to Farrakhan, and they believe in that they're oppressed and the man is against them, and they decide to get out of the area or to get out of the situation. They start selling drugs to their fellow black people and create a whole bunch of drug addicts. They start going around and sleeping with all these females and create a whole bunch of kids that they can't maintain and father. But they're going to get out. And what they do, they create more madness and they become the devils in the society and the destruction of the society. And yet they say they're doing this to save themselves. Self-preservation can often cause us to do the most contradictory things that is against self and against society. But we're doing this to self-preserve. Think about this real quickly now. 3 concepts here to further push this. Notice here, doctrines. We can say we believe in certain doctrine, church doctrines. But doctrines infuse certain concepts that affect our culture. Like we have a doctrine in Adventism called the sanctuary. And from the sanctuary, you get this very clear teaching that the judgment is not right now. The judgment is future. Because of belief in that, it infuses behavior. It affects behavior. It affects worship. Imagine, we as a people normally, up until recently, since many churches have rejected the sanctuary message and the judgment message because they believe in once saved, always saved, or a watered down version of that. I've gone now to becoming a celebration church. Why do they celebrate? Because they think everything that Christ did was finished at the cross and there's nothing else to be done. And they're saved and there's nothing else, they're just waiting to be beamed up. So because of that, now they go to church and they start celebrating. But while they celebrate, just like with Jeremiah say, your sin shall rebuke you. The beat down you're getting shall rebuke you. And you're celebrating with all that sore foot and that 200, 300 pounds extra overweight. That shall be your rebuke. You ain't not celebrating yet. There's still more to come. But that is how a doctrine can affect culture. But the moment you reject the doctrine, as I just showed you, you can see how quickly the mindset changes the person like, oh, so I have everything. I'm done. I don't need to live a clean life. I don't need to clean up myself and my life. I can just do whatever I want because I'm saved and I'm in already. I'm just waiting for Christ to come and beat me up. Because of time, I move on. Constitution. Notice here, the Constitution. Constitution again, the Constitution of the United States or any country, you're listening from another country, any country you're in, it infuses certain concepts that affect culture. You might not think about it, but it infuses certain things into the mindset. I'm going to read 2 things for you. I'm going to read the preamble of the Constitution, and I'm going to read the Bill of Rights, the 6th Amendment. Notice here, firstly, how this principle, and if you reject the things here, you reject basically the country change or you change. Notice here, we the people of the United States. So I have a comma right there and I pause. Notice just the starting point. Although people might say, yeah, this is for every country, but this could be just the king of a country or a dictator dictating this. But this here is the idea that there's a we all in this together, in order to form a more perfect union. So this is what we say now. This is an ideal. Everything that comes after this is just the intention. We don't have this here. So the founding fathers, even though somebody said, well, weren't they keeping slaves and stuff like that? True, because it's just ideals. This is how I would like to be. Like you starting a business, you say, this is how I would like my business to run. But then when the rubber meets the road, you start to cut corners because you realize to get to that ideal, it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of investment of energy and money and all that. I don't have all of that. So let's just cut this ideal out. And probably 2-3 years later, when we get better, more money and more customers, we put that in there. You get that idea. So in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice. So that's the intent. So then probably there was no true justice being done. Ensure domestic tranquility. This is why you could see that's infused in the culture, that you have to basically, if you see what's going on, because somebody said, well, how is this important today? I believe that a lot of what's going on in the investigation with Robert Mueller into the concept or the idea or the accusation that the Russians meddled in America. I think the basic idea is not so much the justice per se. The justice is a result or will affect the ensuring of the domestic tranquility. Because if you notice that the domestic tranquility has been affected, no matter what spectrum you're on or side of the aisle, it's been a rocky road for the last 2 years. There's been a lot of uncertainty. So you got to try to preserve that. This is the whole aim of the government. Notice it's infused in the culture. You want to get rid of evildoers to protect the tranquility. I could talk on this all day. Anyhow, provide for common defense, right? So this would be the federal government. Promote the general welfare. There's a whole lot of things that we do that is infused in the culture that is just literally promoting general welfare. It could be from Social Security all the way to a museum. Secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity. That liberty is a blessing. This is why you shouldn't be, and that's why I'm going to read the Sixth Amendment. I'll get to that in a second. Do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. So this is the preamble. This is where we start. Now notice that now, I'm just going to take this one example just to show that when you go against founding principles, in order to preserve yourself, that often you're destroying yourself. And this is why it's important not to compromise principles. It's ideal. So I'm going to say, as I said, we in this sick world with sin and darkness. But you do whatever you can to hold to the ideal. Because compromising ideals, you do not see it working out well. It end up coming back and bite you in the long run. Notice this. But you do whatever you can. But, we're in a messed up world. And we all sin and fall short of the glory. So this is not talking about that we're going to always be perfect in all things. But you do your utmost best. And you lay it at the feet of Jesus. And you say, Jesus, I believe in these doctrines. I believe in the commandment. I believe in, these principles here that we always promote in America for the tranquility and the peace of myself and my neighbor. I'm going to do my best to preserve it. This is how I see it. Notice here in the amendment, in the Bill of Rights, the Sixth Amendment. Let's see if we can get through this before we close. In all criminal prosecution, the accused shall enjoy the right of to a speedy and public trial, right, by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, And to be, this is why international crimes, I think, is always tried in New York. That's what the law somewhere along the way decide. But anyhow, keep going. And to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witness against him, to have the compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistant of counsel for his defense, right? So this is where you provide a legal aid. You see, it might not spell out everything, but this is what it is. Now think about it. The more we do this, it's an ideal. Well, I just read here, somebody says it's a law. No, it's an ideal. Because you know that throughout history, all the lynching that happened, nobody never really tried to stop to make sure, ascertain if the person was guilty. They were just taken by a mob and killed. So we know this is not the law, so to speak, that is kept. This is an ideal. But the more you try to keep to the ideal and do everything in your power to preserve it, and even do what I'm doing here to preach, to promote it, it's the more tranquil and the better our lives is. Because this is a good ideal. You can't look at this ideal and say this is not a good ideal. Somebody could write a better one, well, we go with that. But this is a good ideal. Speedy trial, that means a person not accused and 10 years later they're still accused or locked in prison. So this is where now I would say you can be. Notice here, the accused shall be informed of the nature of their crime. So you can't be just arrested and then you're going to find out probably 60 days or whatever. You need a speedy trial to know, why am I arrested? Lay it down, as I shouldn't be arrested. You get me? This is important. So when we look at, even somebody will say, well, give me an example. So an example is that lady that was arrested in Canada for crimes, but we don't know what the crimes are, what the accusation is. We haven't heard an official declaration. Now, one is coming, I'm sure, but as citizens, we have to protest, as I'm doing here, anything that seems to go against this ideal, because quickly things can devolve into a draconian state that is doing things out of control, and then we can quickly go back to the dark ages, because all of this was to take us out of the dark ages. You go against this, you go back to the dark ages. And people say, oh, but how about the people in Guantanamo? We're not informed, and they're not informed of their crimes or cause of the accusation. But people say, oh yeah, but they're dangerous people, we have to protect ourselves. Sure, but remember, there's a lot of crime that is being done in the name of America by American citizens who pledged to the Constitution, and their crimes are not being brought to question. They're not being tried for it. So again, one has to be careful, because when we go against these core principles, we are basically destroying who we are, and we're becoming the monsters that we're going after, to be confronted with the witnesses against him. So not no private, somebody accusing me, and then the secret state, the SS that will happen in Germany, come and take me away and then try me and kill me, and nobody know what it is that I get killed for. These are just all ideas. I say the ideas because these are high water marks that you can see throughout history, and even today. A lot of these things, they don't, how many people get things planted on them and stuff like that. And it's just how human beings are. But as a human being individually, we hold these ideals and we try to live by them personally, as each of us are individual citizens of a country. Notice the 10 Commandments. I wanted to spend a little bit of time there, but I ran out of time. The 10 Commandments also is an ideal, and when you follow that, it infuses certain concept into the culture that you live by, and because it spells out specific guidelines for how you to deal with God and man. If you look at the story of the Good Samaritan, you can see real quickly in that story that Christ was laying out, who is my neighbor, and that I should do for my neighbor as I would like them to do for me. And this is simply what we're teaching here. If I want to not be viewed as a monster, so I should want it for somebody else. And I should want the principles, the ideals to be given to me, as if I was accused or if I was viewed a certain way, as I wanted for others. If I fell into hard times, I'd want my neighbors to do for me these things, so hence I should do it for others. This is simply what the Bible is teaching. you do unto others as you like them to do unto you. But people always say, oh yeah, but I have to preserve self. But again, if somebody thinks you're the enemy and think they need to preserve themselves against you, how would you want to be treated? That's how you do it for others. And when life works like this, that ideas become beautiful. And so we do to others as we like them to do unto us. Even when we think, oh yeah, but I need to break principle or break guidelines to preserve myself. Don't do it. Do your utmost best to live by principle. Let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you again for the blessings of this day that you have given to us. Pray, Lord, that truly, dear Father, as you know, with our weak and failing self, that we often are pressured. I pray, Lord, that you may teach us, dear Lord, to go to our knees, to ask for power, and to truly, dear Lord, make every effort, dear Lord, to keep to the principle and do right to our neighbor. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow live again, where we should talk about wisdom for living. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.